you, all of you. It's all fantastic to see you all here this morning and to be here in Burslem, the mother town of the potteries, where, where the spades first hit the ground in the construction of the great Trent and Mersey Canal. A fact which, of course, gives its name to Port Vale. Although, for me, if I'm honest, this is better known as the ground where Arsenal came really close to losing the double in 1998. This is true. 2 draws in the cup and a penalty shootout, very close penalty shootout, somewhere just over there. I went out to have a look at the pitch this morning to look at where those penalties were taken from. But look, today we are here on more serious business, as Yvette said, the launch of Labour's second national mission to make our streets safe and stop criminals getting away without punishment. Now, if you think that sounds basic, something which should be guaranteed in a country like ours, then let me tell you, you're right. Nothing is more important, more fundamental to a democracy like ours. The rule of law is the foundation for everything. Margaret Thatcher called it the first duty of government, and she was right about that. An expression of individual liberty, our rights and responsibilities, but also justice, fairness, equality, one rule for all. That's the principle I've been proud to serve all my adult life. As a human rights lawyer, fighting for families with young children, trying to escape mould-infested accommodation, or for freedom of speech in the McLibel case, with the police service of Northern Ireland advising them how to bring communities together to make the Good Friday Agreement work, and at the Crown Prosecution Service, as the Director of Public Prosecutions, the same principle. Everyone protected, everyone respected, no one denied the law, no one above the law. Not the murderers of Stephen Lawrence, who, for a time, thought that they were. Not Al-Qaeda terrorists. Not MPs, Labour or Conservatives, gaming the expenses system to line their pockets. I prosecuted them all, and I'm proud of that. One rule for all. And that's why I found the pandemic parties in Downing Street under Boris Johnson so reprehensible. The circus of the last few days. A reminder of his total disrespect for a national sacrifice. That's why I said I'd resign if I'd broken those same rules. I just couldn't have looked the British people in the eye and asked them for their trust. Those values are too important to me. The core of my politics today. So if the Tories want to attack me for being a human rights lawyer, attack the values I've stood up for my whole life, I say, fine. That only shows how far they have fallen and how little they understand working people. Because whatever the crime, antisocial behaviour, hate crime, serious violence, it's always working people who pay the heaviest price. Working class communities who have to live under its shadow. That's why tackling crime, law and order will always be important for my Labour Party. Fighting crime is a Labour cause. I grew up working class in a small town. I know how important it is to feel safe in your community. If you don't have a big house and a garden, the streets are where your kids play. Your community is your family, your neighbours, your eyes and ears. You have to feel a sense of trust, of confidence, of security. It's what gives you roots, a precondition of hope, the firm ground you can build your aspirations on. But as somebody who's worked in criminal justice for most of my life, I also know that far too often the inequalities that still scar our society, class, race, gender, do find an expression in the very system that is supposed to protect us all without discrimination. I've talked about this before, but the case that crystallised so much for me was the murder of a nurse called Jane Clough, stabbed to death in the car park of the Blackpool hospital where she worked, killed by the man awaiting trial on multiple charges of raping her on the one morning she went to work unaccompanied. I will never forget the day her parents, John and Penny, came to my office and talked me through the awful treatment they had received from our criminal justice system. It's a moment that has shaped everything I've done since, everything I think about justice, how incomprehensible pain can only be met with practical action, that if you have the power and can do something for the powerless, you've got to roll up your sleeves, work night and day to make the changes, big and small, which can, if not put things right, then at least protect the future. That's what happened that day. As I listened to John and Penny tell me Jane's story, I knew a great injustice had been done. And I made a promise to work with them and make sure no other family would suffer the same fate. So together we changed the guidelines on rape cases in court. And crucially, we forced a change in the law that gave prosecutors the right to appeal against a bail decision. Changes which do give extra protection to women brave enough, like Jane, to place their faith in the system and press charges. But it isn't enough. I know that. In fact, it's why I decided to come into politics. Because the more and more case files I read, the more and more I could see those ugly inequalities at work. You saw it in grooming scandals like Rochdale as well. How good prosecutors and decent police officers, people who hated crime, would end up looking for the perfect victim, casting aspersions based on a way of thinking that was out of date, out of touch with the experience of victims and communities that they needed to serve. Why didn't you go to the police straight away? Why did you go back to them? Why didn't you put up a fight? Questions and assumptions that are deeply flawed and have left vulnerable people, working class women and girls especially, ignored, voiceless, denied justice. That's why the mission today matters to me. I'm proud of my previous work, proud of my record at the Crown Prosecution Service, but this is personal. Yes, it's Labour's plan to tackle the crime wave gnawing away at our collective sense of security. Of course it is. But it's also unfinished business in my life's work to deliver justice for working people.